Hi. My name is Sandy, and I'm an alcoholic. I figure you can do just about anything here. Maybe you should have got Lawrence Welk. I've been to a lot of meetings, and that's the first I've ever heard that kind of stuff. I tell you. I hope you newcomers will hang around for. I see one of them stayed for after the coffee break. I don't know. I'd have probably split. I wasn't into joy and frivolity except when I was stoned, and then I didn't know that I was joyous. I have to say, we're pretty close to what the hell is that day? Valentine's Day, and some of the stuff that the people that are new are going to hear. We're going to talk something, a little bit about God, and talk something, and we may even say the word love, and when I first came around, all of that kind of stuff was kind of hokey and corny, and I've come to believe that I had my perception of things was altogether different than it is now. The trip up here is different. I want to tell you first also that before I forget, I got sober at November 15th in 1973, so I've been around for a little over 11 years. And like tonight, I'm a little bit of a slow starter, and hopefully I'll pick up steam as I go along. And that's the way it was at the time I got sober. I didn't come here to save anybody, including myself. I came here out of desperation, and I came here because I was hurting, and I came here, as the book says, the 12 and 12 says, out of because I had to, not because I wanted to for any virtuous purposes. And still today I have to remember that why I came here is to gain sobriety for myself, and that's what I'm doing here tonight, is that I would like to maintain my sobriety. And when I'm asked to do something in Alcoholics Anonymous, and if it's at all possible, then I do it. She gave me a little note. I'm a Long Beach lover, and I'm from Long Beach, and see you after the meeting, honey. My perception of love is altogether different than it was when I came here. I've been through a lot of relationships outside of the program. Before I got here, I was married a couple times, and I got married once. In fact, I've been married twice since I've been in the program, and all three of those first marriages, I had the idea that with a relationship that you start at the top, and then you work right out of the son of a gun. Sometimes it takes years, but you start at the top, and I always started at the top with sex, and then I always could see the end of any relationship that I was ever in. I knew that the son of a gun wouldn't last. I knew that this was just a temporary thing, and I was planning for the time when there would be the parting of the ways, and sure enough, those things always came true, and today I think that I've turned that around a little bit, and I'll tell you about that later. But that gives you some idea of the kind of guy I am. I only want to learn enough about anything just to get by. I always just wanted to squeak by. It was that way when I was a kid in school. I just wanted to ease by. I made the grades that were necessary so I could stay eligible for football when I was in high school. I just, when I went in the service, I did just enough to keep them from getting a court-martial or from a captain's mast, and I just always, that's the way I always felt like that as long as I just eased by, that everything was going to be all right. And I see this guy laughing back here, and I saw him do a Sammy Davis Jr. thing here a little while ago. I want to congratulate him on that. I looked at that and I thought, my God, he's missed his calling. He's probably Bojangles in disguise. I don't know. But where in the hell was I? It wasn't too important anyway. But I always eased by, just squeak by. I only did enough, and that is true into sobriety too. That I just wanted to ease by, and any concept that I ever had of a higher power. When I was younger, my mother was real religious, and she had us dressing up on Sunday morning and going to church. And what I learned there was probably altogether different than what they taught. But I learned about a punishing kind of God, and he was kind of, he was kind of like Attila the Hun and Merlin the Magician. It was this strange, direct opposite of each other. On the one hand, I thought that, that's the way I learned it, that if I prayed for magic things, for houses and cars and stuff, that maybe he'd grant me these things. And that, of course, that never happened. On the other hand, I knew that when I screwed up, he was going to zap me. And so somewhere along the time that I started drinking, I started turning my back on that kind of a God. Now, like I say, that is probably not what they taught. That's what I learned. And so I had this confused mixture of some kind of higher power. And so instead of fighting with this thing, after I learned to drink and felt the relief of taking a drink, I got to where I just turned my back on that whole business. There was a time when I had been drinking for a while, and I was married for a little while. The first time that I went and repented all my sins, and that lasted for 30 days or so, and I just can't stand the pressure of being so goddamn good. I'll tell you the truth. I set the standards so high when I do those kind of things that I can never live up to. Nobody could live up to those kind of standards. And then it was just much easier to step back then and ridicule people that were religious and ridicule the existence of any kind of higher power or a God or anything. And so I was kind of a half-assed atheist, agnostic, and I didn't know what either one was until I came to the program. And so that was my concept of a higher power. I drank for about 26 years, and from the first that I drank for only one reason, and that was for the effect that was caused by alcohol. That was my only reason for drinking. I said that I liked to drink, and so that I could be sociable, and that was part of it. It was a social lubricant for me because I was an introverted, shy kind of person, and that allowed me to be one of the group and one of the gang, and so that was another it just helped me to converse with people and be a part of society, and so I have this idea that I just try to skim by, and I don't care about God, and there's another thing that I have that's just deep ingrained in me, and that's fear. And that happened from the time I was a little kid. There were a lot of incidents that happened in my home. My mom was real religious on one side. My dad was a full-blown alcoholic. And all I ever remember out of that home when he was present was that there was chaos. And not only chaos, there was a lot of violence. And it seemed that a lot of the times I was jerked out and was the focal point for that violence. So I tried, so I just tried to stay on the periphery of things. So I didn't feel like I belonged to the family really, because I didn't want to be a part of that thing, because when I was a part of that thing, there was a chance that I would get jumped on, and I sure as hell didn't want any of that. It just scared the hell out of me. And there was a couple of incidences where my life was at stake, and it was it was a pretty hairy deal, and so I shunned people, and I stayed clear of situations that where I might get involved with somebody, and and that carried on with me the rest of my life. So by the time I drank, and I could take care of all of those different emotions. And another one that I had was I was always ashamed. I was ashamed of where I came from. I was ashamed of being in this large family, and we're real poor. And now my brothers and sisters, to the best of my knowledge, hadn't, they didn't have that kind of feeling. They weren't ashamed of where they lived, and I was ashamed of where I lived. I was ashamed of my parents, and I was just ashamed. And when I drank, I didn't feel that shame. I could feel apart away from that stuff, and I didn't have to deal with those kind of things. And so, I didn't deal with them, and I drank, and it was when I first started drinking, I had a lot of fun drinking, and then as the years went by, drinking got in the way of relationships, and through my first marriage, my wife used to say things like, "Why don't you?" I brought a six-pack home one time, and I thought, God, I hope this gets me by, for an hour or so. And she said, "Geez, that's nice." She said, "Why don't you just drink one of these a night?" And I thought, Christ, and I told her back then, I said, "What the hell good is one beer? What the hell am I going to do with one beer? I'd rather have none. I'd rather have nothing. I'd rather go naked than have, Jesus. Give me that one beer stuff, because I figure if I drink that six-pack in 20 minutes, I might be able to feel it, And that's the way I drank. It was a pig, and I drank for what it did for me and how I felt. And she couldn't understand that, and I just thought that she was an unreasonable bitch, and I still think she is, Treat a guy like that, my God, and so, to say the least, we didn't get along too good. She had a couple of kids, and I thought that, from my upbringing, that I could be the kind of father that, I was the kind of father that was sort of like Adolf Hitler, Jesus Christ, everybody towed the mark, and I watched them every minute to see what they were doing and see if I could catch them at something, and I did, and Christ, it was miserable for them, and I was miserable all the time, but I thought that's the way it was, I thought that's what you had to do to make people shape up, that you had to stay after them and look over their shoulder and sneak around and all this crap, and it was miserable, and so. It kind of looked to me like that they would team up with their mother, and I think they did, and hell, I would have, some jerk like that, I heard a guy say that he was, he was brought up in the beat, kick, and stomp method of raising children, and that's exactly the way I was raised up, and that's exactly what I started doing, the way I started reacting to family life, and the way I started, that's the way I did things, and I didn't know any better. But I just knew I was miserable all the time, except when I drank. And when I drank, I felt good. And when I drank, other people felt like hell, And I didn't know that was the result of the way I acted when I drank, And I just thought they didn't like to see me having fun. And so that, that marriage went by the wayside. We started at the top, and I worked my way out of that thing, and I knew that I'd made a hell of a mistake. So what I did in my next relationship was I smartened up a lot. I met a gal in a bar, and then we went on on this thing, and we got married in a few months, and God damn, it was awful. I mean, it was just awful. I thought, I had a drinking partner, and even she was, small-minded. She didn't mind going out on the weekends and getting bombed. But that didn't end it for me. I wanted to drink at home and at work and at play, and whatever I did was drink was related to it. And she didn't understand me. And so that thing, it was just a battle. And sometime through that battle, I'd left the house a couple of times, and we were separated some, and then we thought, well, maybe we could make a go of this thing if we had children, and she couldn't have children, so our doctor she'd go to him once in a while with broken ribs and stuff, where she'd fall against a coffee table, and I was always in the room at the time that these things happened, and it was real embarrassing, you know, when she would go to him, and I always thought that she was going to tell him what really happened, you know, and who was doing that kind of damage, and I felt the shame and guilt and remorse of that, and I thought this doctor that she went to said that this couple had a baby and they were going to give it up for adoption, and so we could probably adopt it through a private agency, and so we did, and it was tough to get a baby. Even through a private adoption, you have to the caseworker has to come and visit your house, and they have to see that you have the kind of household that would be conducive to a child, to raising a child, and I always skated on the thin edge of everything. You know, I always worked, but I had it mapped out pretty good that I could drink up till a certain hour, and then if I got 3.5 hours sleep, I could function pretty good on the job, and then I could come home and do that thing, and do it all over again. And when she came one time when I was working graveyards, and it worked out great because it was 2 or 3 hours before I was going to go to work, and so I wasn't drunk. And she came in and we looked like, I guess, that we had a happy and healthy relationship, and so we were able to adopt that child, and that was probably the first time in my life outside of my mother or something that I ever felt what I consider to be love, and that was unconditional love. I didn't know it was unconditional love at the time, but when I went up to see that little kid, I looked through the glass at him, and I just, my heart just sang. I just felt this feeling of warmth and love that I had never felt in that way before, and I really loved that kid, and when we went to get him, the wife that I had at the time, she was scared to death of that child. And what they do when you leave the hospital with a child or anybody that's in the hospital, you have to leave in a wheelchair. And she was just afraid to hold that baby, and so they wheeled me and the baby out in the wheelchair. And I guess that was maybe the first male that ever birthed a child or something. I don't know. That's kind of silly, but. I took that kid home, and I really, God, I mean, my life changed at that time, and it changed in the respect that I had finally found a human being that I really cared for, and I didn't, like I say, I didn't know that was unconditional love, but I really did love that kid. I would change his diaper, and there were times when that little hose goes off, and you're standing there, and I didn't care, and it was. The first time I ever let anybody piss on me without knocking the hell out of them, or trying to, But it just was. That's the way it was, and I was so afraid that kid was going to die that I got him in a car bed. I thought something this good, and feeling about that I couldn't have that because it was just too good a feeling, and it was really too good for me, and. So I put that little car bed beside our bed, and I would sleep at night when I slept, and I would doze off with my hand in the crib, and if that kid moved, I'd look down to see if he was still alive, and if he didn't move, I'd wake up every once in a while and check him out, wake him up, and see if he was still breathing, and it was awful. That kid must have thought, geez, would you leave me alone, you old fart, But anyway, that's the way I felt about him, and a couple years later, me and his mom split up, and he and I went to live with a friend of mine. And he was 2.5 years old then, and it was during the bad part of my drinking, and then I was really on everything was just. I had to work everything to the minute. I couldn't overshoot the mark on anything because I was a functioning drunk, and in this manner, I never functioned when I was a bad functioner when I was drinking. So I knew that I couldn't. I'd learned in years past that I couldn't drink and work at the same time. If I'm drinking, I ain't working. But when I go to work, I can't drink, or goddamn it, I can't function on the job. And so I would. So I picked it. I was brand new in a trade, and I was about 37 years old, and it was a they had newly recognized this trade and had started an apprenticeship program, or I would have never gotten into it, and it was a neat deal for me, and something that to this day I really like doing. And anyway, I had this chance to do this. Well, to perform this particular work, you had to work all over the valley down there, and most times I would get up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning, mostly 4:30, and I'd drive this kid to the babysitter, and I would get home by 5 or 5:30 at night, and then I would take him from the babysitter and bring him home, and those were long days for him and long days for me, and I remember one time when I wrecked my pickup, I had gotten what I did was I had a little accident while I was drinking, and I hit a parked car, and my kid was with me, and when they came out to see what was happening, I asked him, I said, "Don't call the police." I said, "Hell, I got insurance and everything," and the guy said, "Oh, don't worry about a thing," and 2 minutes later the helicopters were there. It was a cop's car that I hit, and so I'm real lucky, and they carted my buns off to jail, and so I was out of a pickup, and this friend of mine had loaned me a little Honda motorcycle, and I'm getting up at 4:30 in the morning. I got this little kid on the front of and it's dead winter time, and I got him on that motorcycle, taking him up to the babysitters, and this guy I used to work with years ago, and he got up early. He was a pumper in a oil field or something, and he was telling me a story one night. We're in the bar. He says, "I saw this crazy son of a bitch. He had a little kid on a motorcycle at 4:30 in the goddamn morning." And I said, "Well, that was me. What do you mean crazy, huh?" And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, but geez, that is a little weird. What the hell are you doing with that kid on?" And it's what I had to do to survive. And so I'd bring when we got home at night. It was like 6 o'clock, and I'll tell you, I wouldn't drink until I put that kid to bed, and he went to bed. I'd pull the shades down and tell him it was dark and time to go to bed, and he had long nights, I'll tell you. And so anyway, that's what I did, and I could drink, and I could drink up until 1 o'clock in the morning, and still I knew that I was on the edge of not functioning in the morning, but I could still make it. Many times I don't remember driving to work, and I was during the end of my drinking. I was working up in Malibu, and it was about a 50-mile trip one way, and I never remembered going. Most of the time I never remembered going. Kind of reminds me of tonight. We were on our way down here, or on our way up here, and coming up the freeway out of Ventura. It was just before we got to Carpinteria. There was a van, an old van. It was one of those alcoholic vans. It's got the bumps all over it, and it made a couple of passes over into our lane, and then we could see that he was, pretty unstable. And Kathy, who's my driver, she's my chauffeur. Since she don't let me drive, sober I'm worse than most drunks driving. Honest to God, I'm terrible. So she drives me around. Anyway, we skated around this guy, and I looked back, and that sinking feeling. I thought, there's a couple of feelings I had. I felt like, Jesus, I can empathize with that guy, because I don't know how many times I've done that thing. I don't know how many times I've run down that road, a danger to everybody on it. And now I'm clean and sober, and I'm looking back at this guy, and I'm thinking, Jesus, I hope he gets caught. I hope he gets arrested. I hope he hits his bottom today, so that he has a chance to reach Alcoholics Anonymous and save his life, before he takes his own life or somebody else's. And that's the way I drove a lot of the time. Those bumps would wake me up, and one of the guys that around our group calls them sobriety bumps. That when if he hit him on the left, he'd just steer a little right, and when he hit him on the right, he'd steer a little left, and try to stay in the middle of those lanes. And that's scary. And I guess some of those old feelings came back to when I was away from home, and when I'd come home from work, if I would get bombed at the office. We got paid on Wednesday night, and we'd all go over to JoJo's. I think every place has got every town's got a JoJo's in it. It's a dirty, dingy place, and we would all cash our checks there and then leave half of it there, and God, it was awful. Crap games going out and back, and it was such, it was 30 or 40 miles from home, and I just remember, God damn it, I've done it again, and I don't know if I'm going to make it home or not. I don't know if I'm going to pass out before I get home, or if I'm going to get in a wreck before I get home, or another 502 or whatever, and I didn't, and it's just all of those things. I guess those feelings came back of how crappy I felt most of the time when I was in that kind of shape and behind the wheel of a car. And on the other hand, if somebody would have said, well, how about letting me drive you, I'd have said, screw you, I can drive, man, I can manage this thing, So anyway, to make a long story even more boring, we got, this kid was born, and I was by myself, and it got to the point where I couldn't handle it anymore, and he went back to live with his mom, and I better sober up here. I went to pick him up one morning. Well, to preface this a little bit, between this time and his mom and I had split up, and I was living with another lady, and a week before I got sober, she decided that it was such a joy living with me that she would try suicide, and I was one night or one day I kicked the door into the bathroom because she was in there too long, and she was lying in the floor in a pool of blood, and she had slashed her wrists, and I had a lot of, I had a big part in that emotionally, instability, the emotional instability of hers. I really fed that, and I'm not real proud of what, of the part I played in that. But what I had come to from this life that I was leading was when I looked in that room, the first thing that I thought of when I saw her laying on the floor is, I wonder who's going to clean this goddamn mess up, and that's the kind of animal that I had become. And so she left, and she went to wherever people go that try to commit suicide. I think she went in for observation, and I thought, good deal, she's gone. Now I can drink like I'm, like a gentleman, and I didn't know anything about the chapter where your hats are off to me, but if I'd have known that, I'd thought they'll take their hats off to me, I'll show them how to drink. And that was... That last week of drinking was no better or no worse than many other weeks that I had. The only thing is that I had run out of excuses and places to go, and I was running out of people, and I was running out of. When I looked at me, I could see that that there was something wrong here, and that all of the things that I had defended my right to drink were kind of slipping away from me, and I was sick and I was tired, and the next weekend I went to pick up my son. He was living with his mom, and I still loved that kid, and through that time of my drinking, by this time he's 6 years old, and through my drinking time I hadn't done too many things to, and maybe I couldn't do too many things to create to create a situation where that kid wouldn't love his dad, and he loved me very much, and I loved him, and on the way home, we had a little conversation, and he said something like, "Dad, were you a good kid when you were little?" And I said, "Yeah, I was okay, I guess." And he says, "What about me, Dad? Am I a good boy?" And I said, "Oh, Kevin, you're a wonderful boy. I love you to death." And he looked up at me, with those eyes, and he just like he adored me. And he said, "Dad, when I grow up, I want to be just like you." And right at that moment, I didn't think I was much of a role model as a father or as a human being. And I think at that time, that was, my moment of clarity, if that's what it was, that I was able to see myself as I really was, and the kind of person that I had become. And I decided at that time, and I didn't know why, but I decided at that time that as soon as I got home, I was going to call Alcoholics Anonymous, and I did. And when I called, it was, this sunny voice answered over the phone, and she said, "Yes, Alcoholics Anonymous, may I help you?" And I said, "Jesus, I hope so," and she said, "Well, are you drinking?" I said, "No," and she said, well, what kind of help do you want? And I said, well, what kind have you got? You know, I was game for just about anything. And she said, well, would you like to have somebody come and visit you? And I said, geez, that would be great. I'd really love that. She said, well, what's your address? And I gave her my address, and she started laughing, and I thought, geez, what's so funny about my address, you know? And she said, well, we used to have a little house right down the street from you, and we lost it through drinking. Jesus Christ, you know, I was a couple house payments behind, and I didn't want to hear that goddamn cheerful stuff. And so I thought, well, maybe we'll get somebody sensible. I said, well, yeah, out there. And she said, yeah, we'll send somebody out. And in a few minutes, I got a phone call, and this guy said, my name is Bill Starr, and I'm going to come over there and see you. And I said, okay, Bill. I said, he said, how do you get to your house? And I was explaining to him. He said, no, I have to take the bus over there. He said, how do you get over there on the bus? And I said, I hadn't the slightest idea. I never rode a bus to my house. I had no idea. And he said, don't worry about a thing. He said, I'll be right over. About 20 minutes later, I got another call, and this is Bill Starr. He says, I'm at the corner of such and such and such and such, and I'm waiting on a bus, and I'll be there. Don't worry about it. Don't drink, and I'll be there. And he hung up the phone, and about 20 minutes later, he said, this is Bill Starr. I'm going to be, and I'm over at so-and-so, and he said, I'll be there. Now, don't worry. I says, how about if I come and pick you up? He says, no. He says, let me get over there. So hung up, and he called again, and he says, this is Bill Starr. I said, where in the hell are you at, Bill? He told me, I says, don't move a goddamn muscle. I'm coming to get you. So I went to pick up my 12-step call, and old Bill was long and lean, and he got over to my house, and he started talking about real loud about AA and Alcoholics Anonymous, and I said, Jesus Christ, tone it down, my kid is coming through here. And he said, oh, okay, and he was very accommodating. I said, and besides, goddamn it, the winter's a hot day, and the neighbors will hear, you know, about AA. I said, just tone that crap down. You know, I forgot to tell you, that, a week before I'd driven half on the lawn, you know, and fell out on and stayed there for half the night, you know, and that I'd passed out in the garage one time with the door open. It faced the other street over there, and that's not a big deal, but I was naked, but I didn't want him to let the neighbors know that I had some kind of a problem with alcohol, you know. And so anyway, he quieted down, and so he told me a story about jewel thievery in the Florida Keys and some wild thing, and he said he was going to write a book about it. And I said, Jesus Christ, what's happening here? And he says, and I just got out of Lompoc, he said, about 30 days ago. And then he took his shoes off and socks off and went in my living room. He says, you see what I'm doing? I said, yeah, Bill, but I don't believe it. And he said, I'm running my toes through your carpet. He said, we don't have any carpet up at Lompoc. And I didn't doubt him that they didn't, but I thought that was pretty weird. So anyway, we talked then for quite a while, and I cooked dinner for him, and I fed him, and I took him back to the step house where he was staying. And on the way down there, he said that he'd like to be my sponsor, and somehow, as new as I was, that didn't have a good ring to it. I thought, maybe I'd like to look around here a little bit, and I laugh about that story, and that's really the way it happened. But that guy did the very best he could with what he had that day. He carried the message, and one thing that it does for me is it relieves me of a lot of responsibility up here tonight. What I say has no bearing on whether you get or stay sober. and what he had to say to me had no bearing on whether I got or stayed sober. I had to want this thing real bad, and that's what I did. I wanted this thing. It wasn't because I needed it; it was because I wanted it. And I saw him a few times after that, and then he took off, and then a couple of months later I got a call from him in a little sleazeball hotel down in Long Beach, and he called me and asked me to come down and see him. And I went down and seen him, and he had been drinking, and he was had some big deal going. He was going to he had a patent on frozen bananas or something, and he was trying to sell his patent, and he needed a few bucks, and I gave him a few bucks, and I guess he got him a short dog of wine and took off. And I've never seen him since, and I mention his name a lot in AA meetings because I think, I thought maybe someday I'd see him in a meeting where I was sharing. I'd really like to thank him again for what he did for me, because he brought the message of Alcoholics Anonymous to me. Another thing that he told me in that in that first time that I met him, he said, by the way, he says, it's pretty hard coming down off that booze. He said, so I'm still on Valiums, and he said a lot of these hard-nosed AAs don't like them Valiums. And I thought, yeah, I bet there are a lot of them hard-nosed son of a bitches. I started not liking them too, because I was taking Valium, and I thought he'd made a lot of sense to me, I found out later, that was about 2.5 months later, I'd taken another Valium, and I had to change my sobriety date. Now, I'm not real honest, and I don't get honest real quick, so it was 7 years before I changed my sobriety date. I don't want you to think you're talking, a saint is talking to you here. But I got started in Alcoholics Anonymous, and the start that I got was a good start, and I don't think there are any bad starts. I think that like I say, I really wanted this program, and I wanted what the people had, and I went to a lot of meetings, and I heard a lot of things, and I started. One of the first things that I thought I'd do is I'd find this higher power, and as soon as I got comfortable with finding this higher power, I got down on my knees directly, and I started praying to bring that lady back, that had committed suicide or tried to commit suicide, and she came back, and somebody then, it was too late by then, but they said, be careful what you pray for, and I'd already screwed up, why didn't they tell me that before, and they probably had, and I wouldn't have listened anyway, so we got married, and we didn't get along when I was drunk, and we didn't get along when I was sober, and she kept on drinking, and she kept on doing her thing, and we stayed together for a couple years, and that was as bad as any relationship that I ever had on drinking. I mean, we did all of those things, all of those same things, and I stayed sober somehow, and I went to meetings, and it was a miserable existence, and I learned something about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and finally an incident happened, and we split up, and she went her way, and honest to God, it was the best thing that could have happened for her and for me, and so I had been sober, and I was single and sober for the first time in my life, and I started thinking about relationships, and I tried to put together. I thought I had made a lot of bad choices. I never thought about the other way around, and I think that in those choices that were made for my relationships, that we both sides made a pretty bad choice in each other, and I learned that sick kind of attracts sick, and I really wanted to be well, and I wanted to be. That was a big trouble spot in my life, and I went through this roller coaster of in Alcoholics Anonymous of I wouldn't date any women on the program, and then I wouldn't date any women off the program, and I didn't get along with nobody, and it sure as hell wasn't their fault. I had a lot of growing to do, and it takes a lot of time, I think, to at least it did for me to find out what enough about a relationship to have one that would work, and And so I started thinking about all of the things that I learned here about what I was doing wrong, and then I started, people were telling me that, maybe I ought to, be friends first, and then develop a relationship out of a friendship, and that sounded like a crappy idea to me. I always like putting that thing first, that sex thing first, and then, then I could see how to get out of it later on, But that all that ever caused me was misery, and and it's like the definition for insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over, expecting a different result, and that's what I was doing. I was doing the same things over and over and over, and expecting a different result, and the result always was the same, and that not only in the aspect of my relationships, but in my life, relationships with my bosses and other people. So anyway, I did a lot of trial and error stuff, and I finally came to the point where I really gave up, and I thought maybe I'm one of those kind of guys that will be on this program and will have to just stay single, because there just is no way for me to hang on to any relationship. If they would last for 2 or 3 weeks, that was a long-term relationship to me, and I just was sick of it. I was sick of the way I felt, and I was sick of what I was doing, and just kind of gave up on the whole thing, and I just I kind of finally turned that aspect of my life over to the care of God, and I got pretty comfortable like that, and I started living to find out how I could get along first with me, how I could, because there were times that I couldn't get along with myself, and my son taught me a lot of things, and one of the things that he taught me is after a period of time, after a period of sobriety, and a lot of people in sobriety get this way, and that was the way I went about it. I thought, now that I'm sober, all those harebrained ideas that I had sitting on them bar stools, about how to make $1 million, by God, now I can put them into action, Well, somebody said recently, if you're a dumb businessman drunk, you're going to be a dumb businessman sober, and I wouldn't believe that bullshit, I knew that I was, had that keen alcoholic sense of timing, and I went into a business, and I failed miserably, but I did it. I worked at it 16 hours a day to fail, and seemed reasonable to me at the time, but during this time, I spent a lot of time away from my son, and he asked me one time. He said, "Dad, would you please, just spend a night with me, come in, or an evening with me, and come home early, and let's do something together." And so I said, "Okay," and we got together that night, and I don't know if we went out to dinner, probably, and came home. And the first thing I did was I, turned on that TV and sat down on the couch and said, "Come on over and sit down." And he sat down for a few minutes, and he got up and he went into the bedroom and he got a game out. And he says, "Hey, Dad, let's play a game together." And I says, "Oh, geez, son, I don't know. I feel pretty tired." And so he went in and back in the bedroom, and he came out and he had this game, and it was called. He says, "Look, let's play aggravation." I said, "I can't even stand the goddamn title of the thing. I'm not gonna play this aggravation." And he says, "Okay." And so he went back and he says, "I know you know how to play this one." He brought out Monopoly, and I said, "Okay, turn the TV off and let's get down on the floor. It's going to take 3 hours to play the game," and on and on and on, and he folded the thing up kind of disgustedly, and he went back in his bedroom, and I'm watching TV, and he didn't come out, and I thought, Jesus Christ, here I take my time out of my busy schedule to be home, and he doesn't even come in the living room with his dad. So I went back there to tell him that, and I looked at him, and he's over there doing something, and I said, "Kevin, I'm going to stay home with you tonight, and we're supposed to, why don't you come out to the living room so we can be together?" And he said probably one of the most intelligent things I've ever heard. He said, "Dad, just because we're in the same room don't mean we're together." And when he said that, thank God I had enough program to know that this was a truth that this child was telling me, that just because we're in the same room don't mean we're together, that he wanted a little bit of quality time from his dad. He wanted to share some time with his dad, and from that night up until probably a year ago now, we spent one night a week together, and we went to shows, and we went to movies, and we went to productions, and we went to see a chorus line, and we went to car shows and boat shows, and then we just drove around, and sometimes we got along, and sometimes we didn't get along, sometimes we fought, and sometimes we had a good time, you know. But we did that every night for I don't know how many years that was. He was 9 at the time, probably 6 years or so. We went out once a week, and we developed this quality time together, and it was a good lesson for me, and it was and I don't have any regrets about leaving him alone, or I didn't do this or I didn't do that, because I did the best I could, and I did the things that I thought were important for him and necessary for him, and up until that's a year ago, then he started going out with girls, and and then Dad isn't so important anymore, so I got kicked out of that deal, and I didn't like that too much, but that's the way it was, and I find today that that there's been a few things that I've learned from that boy. He hasn't turned out exactly like I would like him to turn out. He kind of looks like a half-ass punk rocker. He buys his clothes at the Goodwill, and that's goddamn embarrassing. I can afford, J.C. Penney, for Christ's sake, but that, that's a source of embarrassment for me. And I thought, Jesus, and then I thought for sure that I was raising a Rhodes Scholar, and that, we'd be sending him off to Oxford, and I also thought that although he was a little small, that he could probably play football, and I could sit up in the stands and root for him, and he'd probably be all league. And what it was, he played a little bit of soccer and said, "Hell, I don't like it," and people are kicking at me. I don't care about that stuff, and I, all of those things. And oh well, hell, I'll accept it. He's just kind of a dud. Anyway, about a year ago, he'd asked me to take him to school, and I picked, we're driving out of the driveway, and he said, "Oh, Dad," he said, "last night," he said, "there was a cat came up here," and he said, kind of a yellow-looking thing, and he said it had its tail was broken in 2 or 3 places, and he said and I picked it up, and he said it was so weak that it could hardly make a sound, and he said I went in the house and I got a little bowl of milk, and I sat it down there for the cat, and he ate a little bit of it, and he says, and when I picked him up, and he has a real tough time. He has allergies to everything, and when he picked that cat up, I know that his head just blows up like a balloon. But how he felt about that cat was more important to him than what it was going to do to his, for his allergies. And as he's telling me this story, I'm thinking about the difference in what I'm hearing and how I react to it. Now, some years ago, I would have said, you kick that cat in the ass and throw him over in the ditch over there and stay away from him. You catch something from that damn animal, And what the difference was that I saw that that there was a spark of love in that kid and a goodness about what he was doing, that was far beyond what the things that I do, in my life. And I thought, Jesus, what a nice thing for him to do. And we got to school, and it was that very same morning he was getting out of the pickup, and he looked across the street, and he said, "Oh, that's Dougie or something." He said, He's a retarded kid." And he says, "I'm kind of his bodyguard." And I thought, yeah, you probably make fun of him and all that stuff. And he said, no. He says, not really. He says, I'm kind of. And so he called across the street. They called the kid's name. The kid looked, and he had no recognition of who Kevin was. And as Kevin walked over toward him, he said, "It's me, it's Kevin." And that kid's face just lit up in this big smile, and they shook hands, and he took this retarded kid and he put his arm around him, And I was never more proud of my son than I was at that moment, He was doing things that just are decent, and that people that are decent human beings do, and he has feelings of decent human beings, and so I stopped putting expectations on him, and I stopped thinking about what I would like him to be, and got got next to what he is. I'm just raising a pretty decent kid, that's all, who looks a little weird and and doesn't dress in the kind of clothes that I'd like him to. I'd like him to be a preppy, and he just isn't. And I look at his cousins, and he's got a couple of cousins, Kathy's niece and nephew, and and they're just kind of like the model of little Lord Fauntleroy. And they march along, and they do everything just exactly right, and they're lovely kids, And I would like Kevin to fall right in there and do all that stuff. And he's more like this, but he is a decent kid, and like all, he's 17 years old now, and like a lot of kids between the ages of 12 and 17, he's been a real pain in the ass, I'll tell you. And we have had our ups and downs. But I've learned something about love, and this kind of love that I have today is the kind that I try to have, the kind that asks nothing of the other person. After I'd been single for quite a while on this program, I had given up on finding anybody, and I can't lie about it. Now I was in meetings, and I'd go to meetings, and I'd look for her, and they just didn't show up. That's all, and I asked this gal out one time, on a chance that she might go out with me. I knew she was too damn good, and she was too pretty, and all of that stuff. And she said, no. She said, I'm sorry, I'm dating a guy right now. And I said, Jesus, that's too bad. So anyway, I let it go. I think I asked her a couple of times, and I said, Jesus Christ, I got to give this stuff up, and this hurts too much. I didn't like to put myself out there too hard. Anyway, sometime later, I got the word from a friend of mine that she might be interested in going out with me now, and I guess she had split up with this guy, and so I asked her out, and we started this relationship out altogether different than any other relationship that I've started out before. We started out by trying to be friends first, and we found out that there were a lot of things that we liked about each other, and I knew that there were a lot of things that I liked about her, and she was in the program for one, and I liked that, and I liked what I saw, and like this, she had what I wanted, and I was willing to go to any lengths to get it, and she was always with the, she was always bringing newcomers to meetings, and giving people rides, and she was a real social type of person, and she just radiated this kind of AA radiance, and it was love, and so we got to know each other, and after a while we fell in love, and it was, I fell in love way before she did, and I was glad for her prudence and her standoffishness, because that kept kept me honest, and and we were, and like I say, we became friends first, and a year after we had met, we were married in a ceremony up in Palos Verdes at a beautiful place, and we had one of those AA weddings, and one of our friends up there, in fact, he's going to be up here next week, Jerry M., married us, and it was just a beautiful thing. And in this AA wedding, everybody kind of shares in the thing, not just the preacher and the two people. And this guy's no preacher, believe me. I don't want to take his inventory, but he's about as spiritual as I don't know. Anyway, I love the guy, and we had this AA wedding, and all of my friends came that are in Alcoholics Anonymous, and my family came, and we just had a beautiful time, and And it was a kind of wedding that I probably and kind of ceremony that I always wanted. I didn't know how to go about getting it. It was a kind of relationship that I always wanted and didn't know how to go about getting. I know today that two sicks don't make a well, and we were both sober long enough to realize what kind of what we were doing with our lives, and we could share a program together, and it started out beautifully, and we've had our ups and downs, and we've had some pretty harrowing experiences as far as our relationship is concerned. But I know that with the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, that it's possible to have the kind of relationship that I see people walking through with the rest of their lives a day at a time, in some kind of happy and joyous union. And it's something I never had a shot for outside of this program. I found a loving God here that has sustained me through a lot of the ups and downs of whatever happens out there in life, and this God, as I understand Him, all He asked me to do is my part. If I ask for His guidance and then expect it, He will give me His guidance, and all I have to do is get out there and do the footwork that is necessary for me to stay sober and stay happy. Seemed like there was something else I wanted to tell you before I parted, but ending this thing on this kind of Valentine's deal, I think that's probably the most important thing that I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous outside of staying sober, is that I can have a relationship with a woman today, and like I had never had before. I have relationships with friends now that I could never have ever dreamed of having. I was always on the outskirts. I was always wouldn't let nobody get too close. But today I'd like to, if I was transparent, that would be okay. I'd like to be as transparent as I can. We share each other. I sponsor quite a few people, and I share from a gut level how I feel and what I've done, and they share what they've done, and we can see each other as we truly are, and we walk away from these times and really in a kind of friendship and love that I never had before, men and women, and it's just wonderful. I submit that anybody who is new here tonight, and you give a little bit to this program, the thing will work. And if you want it to work real good, you give everything you got, and then it'll work real good. Go to 90 meetings in 90 days if you possibly can. I don't know how many meetings they have around here, but go to as many as you can, and get as close to the people and stick your hand out, And sometimes you think that people are unfriendly, and maybe they are, I don't know. But what we have to do is go a little bit further and make ourselves available, And the people here, and I'm sure you'll find them here that, like they are down south, that are ready to extend their hand and to help you through the rough times, and that's the way they've been with me. I want to thank you for asking me up here, and I want to say God bless all of you, and good night.